The Autoimmune Connection is a web series dedicated to all things autoimmune, with hosts Christina Feindel of A Clean Plate, Emma King of The Bacon Mum, Kate J. of Healing Family Eats, and Rory Linehan of The Paleo PI, interviewing new guests every episode. We're bringing patients, practitioners, friends, and family together to connect the dots between diet, lifestyle, and autoimmune disease.
Hi everybody and welcome to the Autoimmune Connection. My name is Kate J from the blog Healing Family Eats, and I'm really happy to be here today talking about the subject of Lyme disease and the autoimmune protocol. Lyme disease is fast becoming an epidemic, with an estimated 300,000 cases being diagnosed each year in the US alone. It's also called the Great Imitator because it's able to mimic a host of other AI diseases such as multiple sclerosis, ALS, chronic fatigue syndrome, Alzheimer's, and many, many more, which is very scary. But it's also a reason that if you think that you're suffering from autoimmune disease yourself and you're undergoing a battery of testing, it might well, that are coming back inconclusive, it might well be a good idea for you to consider getting yourselves tested for Lyme. Anyway, I'm here today with two of my favorite bloggers. I got Gabriella and Vanessa, who are going to talk to us today about how they use the AIP to manage their diagnosis of Lyme disease. Welcome, you two. It's really nice to have you here.
Thank you.
Hi. So because we have a lot to talk about and so little time to discuss it in, we're just going to have a really brief introduction. If you'd like to say who you are, what you do, where you do it, that would be great. And Vanessa, you've done this all before, so why don't you start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Vanessa Colleran, and I blog over at True North AIP, and I'll keep it short and sweet. I'm just happy to be here and happy to be talking to you guys today about this.
Great. Gabriella, do you want to say something?
Well, I'm Gabriella, and I blog at Beyond the Bite for Life, and I also am starting a Lyme community, which is Beyond the Bite community, but besides that, that's where I'm at.
Okay, that's great. Well, welcome again. I'm really pleased to be able to sit here with you and talk about it. So let's get straight with these questions. I've got a few written down. It's very much the Gabriella-Vanessa show. So the first question is, can you explain how your life has panned out from your very first symptoms, looking back now, because of course your very first symptoms probably didn't highlight anything in particular for you, but can you describe how your life has panned out since then? Vanessa, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I started getting symptoms probably 9 to 10 years ago now. My first symptoms were autoimmune in nature, so psoriasis and Raynaud's syndrome, even though I didn't realize that that's what that was at the time. But at the same time that those two diseases started showing up, I also started getting a host of other problems that were really affecting my day-to-day life. Chronic fatigue being probably one of the worst, as well as insomnia, which I guess they kind of go hand in hand potentially. But other things too, just really bad memory, poor information, recall, confusion. I was having vertigo, my eyesight was getting bad. Like, those were just some of my cognitive problems. But the list ranged from, anywhere from my head to the rest of my body. And it just seemed like these symptoms were coming on really fast and furious in a short period of time. And I remember going to my doctor shortly after it was starting to get really bad with my list. I had written them all out, and I had asked him, was there anything that could explain these symptoms all showing up at the same time? I just felt like there must be some relationship between them. And at the time, he didn't think that there was anything that could explain, that particular scenario. So he decided to try to treat individually, like with the insomnia. He offered me sleeping pills, and with the depression, of course, antidepressants and all that stuff. And being, I guess, stubborn at the time, I refused to go down that road because I just couldn't buy the fact that these were all individual problems. And so fast forward to about 1.5 years ago, that's when I actually got my Lyme diagnosis. So I went from 9, 10 years ago to 1.5 years ago without even knowing that I was dealing with the Lyme. and coincidentally had already been on the autoimmune protocol for about a year and a half once I got my Lyme diagnosis.
Mm. Wow. Does that seem familiar to you, Gabriella, or is yours a different story?
It's a little different. I would say that I started when I say around like 12 is when I started feeling off, and I would get random symptoms in my joints, in my head, in my gut, just different signs of a weakened immune system. I also had, or have, I don't know what you would say, the Raynaud's and the circulation issues, and they pretty much would come in and out every other month, and so we didn't know why they were happening, but we kind of just always put them on the back burner because my family and I were not ones to just go to the doctor for anything. So we just figured, oh, it's because you're growing or you're just, you know, going through growth spurts and stuff. But then a few years later, in like 2011, my symptoms progressively kept getting worse. That's when I changed my diet, so I was, you know, gluten-free, dairy-free, all of that kind of stuff. And I was still able to do some sports, but just everything was getting more and more not normal. It was kind of taking over my life slowly. And then in 2011, I call it my brick wall, which is literally when, in the span of one day, my body just collapsed and all the symptoms that I was experiencing got 10 times worse, and then a bunch of other ones got added to it. So, like low blood pressure, severe brain fog, and just a bunch of different issues that just kind of all came together in one day, and then from there we went like downhill, and that's when we pursued the Lyme diagnosis.
Right. And so how long did it take you to actually get the diagnosis then?
Thankfully, it did not take that long. We pursued 3 different doctors because we have a friend that went through a similar condition with their health and Lyme. So we kind of knew what doctors to go to. We kind of had the resources. So it only took probably 4 months to get it from my naturopath, and then it took longer through the Lyme literate neurologist that I saw. But so it came pretty fast.
Yeah. But Vanessa, how long did it take you to get yours?
Once I got into a doctor that
yeah
was able to, I mean, I went into a naturopath a year and a half ago, and it's the very first thing she said to me. I brought that long list that I had been bringing into every specialist appointment that I had had in the last 9-10 years, which is an exhaustive list. When I brought that in with her, it's the first thing that she thought of, and it's the first thing that we tested. That was done immediately, and I think the test took about 3 weeks to do because I'm up in Canada. I only sent my blood down to a lab down in California. So once I knew where to go and I had a doctor that could recognize that these things all could potentially be related to one another, it happened very quickly.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
So I'm fascinated to hear about how you both came to the AIP. What you tried before you got to the AIP, and what it has actually done to change your life, basically. How does that go, Vanessa?
So, like I alluded to before, when I first started getting sick and I was getting all these specialists that were trying to get me to go on all these drugs to treat individual symptoms that I was having, I just wasn't buying the fact that I was all of a sudden 33 years old or whatever it was, and now I needed to be on 6 different medications. So I kept pursuing different avenues. I tried everything from Chinese herbal medicine to acupuncture to naturopaths in the beginning, and that's when the diet piece started to sort of come into play. I dabbled for many years with different modifications in my diet, but never anything specific. It was hard for me to have any kind of guidelines to follow, so I just sort of kept dabbling. But of course, you know, it wouldn't be long-lived. I would do something for 3 or 4 weeks, and I didn't really see any results from that, so I'd switched it up. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago, I think I was starting to hit, I think Gabriella called it her brick wall. I'll call it my rock bottom. And that's when my symptoms were so bad and my fatigue was so bad that I could barely get out of bed in the day. And I was having real concerns about my ability to even take care of my children. My husband's a pilot, so he's away a lot. So I was alone with 2 small boys. And it was really hard for me to make them lunch. And I was desperate. And so it was out of desperation that I got online and tried to dig a little bit more. And I came across Dr. Terry Wall's TED Talk about how she reversed her MS symptoms through her diet. So that was definitely the first time that I saw kind of a protocol in a way of what to eat, what not to eat. So that intrigued me. And as my symptoms got worse and worse, I kept digging and then stumbled across the Paleo Mom's website and the autoimmune protocol specifically. And it was like a eye-opening day for me. I'll never forget it. And I think it was 5 days later, I had spent those 5 days kind of getting all my ducks in a row, getting rid of the food out of my cupboards that I knew I can't have, and getting some food in my fridge that I knew I needed to try to eat. And I dove full on into AIP 100% within that very short period of time. And I guess I haven't looked back since. I was strict AIP for 2.5 years, and only in the last 6 months have I started to do some reintroductions. So it's been a 3-year journey for me so far with tremendous results. I saw results immediately, and I think that's a testament to how well this diet actually works, because it's hard, and you're not going to stick to a protocol that is hard unless you're feeling better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's your incentive, isn't it? But so it's just AIP that you're doing. There are no other sort of eating protocols that you're
Nope.
incorporating.
No, I'm, learning what works best for me as far as like carbohydrate intake and specific foods that I tend to show a bit more of an intolerance to and stuff like that. But it's all under the umbrella of the autoimmune protocol. I haven't felt the need to incorporate anything else into it because I've responded so well.
Yeah, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
And you, Gabriella, how about you? How did you come to find the AIP?
Well, it definitely wasn't direct. I would say that changes in my diet began even before hitting my brick wall, just because my GI symptoms were getting so bad before then. And then as the months went on in 2011 and all my symptoms kept getting worse, we finally got a diagnosis that the Lyme had damaged my small nerves in my intestines, so that would explain a lot of the issues I was having. And from that, a lot of other infections and just complications and symptoms would arise, and we could kind of address those complications, but nothing ever, like we would address a parasite or something like that. It would work for the time being, but then I would be left just, back where I was with all the GI issues. So that's kind of when I was like, okay, I need to do something and change my diet even further, and trying to heal my gut, because that's just where everything seemed to stem from. So that's, I think through all that is just when I started researching online, like Vanessa did, out of desperation, because I just couldn't cope and get through day-to-day life at all. And I didn't want to eat because it makes me feel awful, that kind of stuff. So it was probably 2011, or 2012, that's when I really was digging deeper, and I came across all the paleo blogs like Chris Kresser and Mark Sisson, and then Sarah Ballantyne, and I came across her protocol, and to me it made perfect sense, and I had already been kind of intuitively taking some of those foods out of my already paleo kind of diet frame, and it was just, it just works. I mean, there was really no second guessing it, or, you know, it's helped me tremendously, just get through every day and then heal.
And how long did it take for you to actually realize that the AIP was the one for you and it was actually doing some good?
It was probably when I started having even more so severe reactions to some of the foods that are eliminated on it, and I could pinpoint what was an autoimmune reaction and a worsening in my symptoms. So it really didn't take long. I don't think I can put a time frame on it, because it just kind of happened over the span of a few months. But
yeah, no, I was going to say that's the great thing about the AIP. People think that it's such a restricted diet, but it is, because you're eliminating all the most common allergens. But then that way your body actually, you know, cleans up, so to speak, and then realizes what it is that's been affecting it all this time, and you get results really, really quickly, which is great. So can we talk about protocols for the Lyme? I mean, you talked about the protocol for your sort of the food side of it and the autoimmune side, and of course Lyme disease is an autoimmune disease, but what in particular have you done for your Lyme disease? Gabriella, why don't you take it away again?
All right. Well, I would say it wasn't really a protocol, but one of the first major treatments was an IVIG treatment through my neurologist to address the small nerve damage. And that was one of the big things that I did for 2 6-month intervals. So that brought me all the way to like 2013. And we did that for a really long time. And in between there, throughout all these years, I've done different herbal supplements. Not necessarily a protocol, but just what I've needed and done through a naturopath or a kinesiologist, things like that. And then it's just most recently, the past year, is when I began the PK protocol, which was brought to our attention by my main functional medicine doctor, and that's a diet, IV, and oral supplement protocol.
Right. Is that a day-to-day thing, or how does that work? I don't know anything about the PK protocol.
Yeah, it's a day-to-day thing. It's based off of my blood work, and really what it's addressing is the toxicity in my cells, and why all the other things that I've done for my Lyme have certainly had their place and have helped me, but nothing really is getting me past, you know, the last bump, so to say, of getting better and getting past the fatigue and the continuing other issues. So that's what that's addressing, and it's right now I'm only doing an IV once a week. It was like 4 to 5 days a week, but it's also a bunch of supplements based off of my blood work and what my body is deficient in, and it's also a ketogenic diet. So I add that to AIP. So I eat AIP is my main way of eating. I chose to keep it that way, and then the PK protocol is ketogenic, so I just add that in.
And how does that work? What are you cutting out more things, or?
Well, yeah, I can't have any. For the meantime, at least, I can't have any starchy vegetables. That's probably the main difference. So
Right.
It's just lower carb and more so emphasis on fat, even though, you know, AIP, you eat good fat, but with the PK protocol, I eat a lot. I have to eat a lot.
Okay. So the starchy vegetables, that they're feeding the Lyme bacteria, is that the theory, or?
The theory is it goes in what the PK protocol is doing to my mitochondria. The starchy vegetables, the sugars, it activates an enzyme that goes in and undoes what the PC, the phosphatidylcholine, is doing. and all the different supplements and fatty acids, what they're doing. So eventually I will be able to eat those again. But in the meantime, while it's trying to heal my cell walls, I have to stay away from them.
Sure. Okay. Vanessa, how about you? Do you have any other protocols in place?
Yeah, you know, interestingly enough, the things that my naturopath and I decided to focus on were very similar to the things that are focused on in the autoimmune protocol. So there's obviously the diet piece, but she really wanted to work on sleep and detox and stress and exercise. And when I told her that I was on the autoimmune protocol and she realized that I had the diet part dialed in really well, she said to me, well, you're kind of halfway there. You're like more than halfway there as far as a real good Lyme protocol goes. So let's really ramp up these other lifestyle factors and see if we can get your fatigue under control and stuff like that. So, you know, I looked at exercise, I looked at sleep, I looked at all those factors a little bit more closely and have been tweaking them. And it's a continuous work in progress. I'm not going to say that I'm there in any regard. But the other things that we have done over the course of the last year and a half is I have done a trial of 6 weeks of oral antibiotics. We've also done about 6 months of herbal antibiotics. We've done some Rife therapy, which I don't know if you're familiar with what that is.
Can you explain that?
Simply put, it's radio waves, and the theory is that these radio waves are supposed to go through your tissues in your body and identify certain bacteria and basically shake their structure and render them, I guess they kill them. So I guess that's it in a nutshell, and there's lots more information about that. But so we explored that for probably about 3 or 4 months as well. And so between the herbal antibiotics, the oral antibiotics, I also have done like a nasal, intranasal antibiotics because I have chronic sinus problems, and we're trying to figure out if the sinus issues are Lyme related or co-infection related. And the Rife therapy, besides those specifically, everything else has been really about the diet and the lifestyle factors.
Okay, that's really interesting. I didn't know anything about that. What about autoimmune issues in general? Both of you touched on the subject that you had some issues that came up and were present before you got your Lyme disease. Has anything else come up since then as a result of maybe going on the AIP and cleaning up your body and your body reacting in a certain way, or are all the autoimmune diseases, other ones, coming into tempering down now? Vanessa?
I would have to say we're definitely exploring other avenues to see if there are other autoimmune diseases at play. I'm working with a functional medicine doctor now in Vancouver to explore those options. Nothing to date. I haven't had any other diagnosis or anything like that to date. And as far as my existing symptoms of my 2 autoimmune diseases that I was diagnosed with, my Raynaud's syndrome, I was actually thinking about it the other day. In retrospect, I think I finally went through a whole winter without having any major problems with Raynaud's, which is awesome. As well as with my psoriasis, I think what's happened is it's led me down a path of really being able to figure out what is the main triggers for my psoriasis. So I think I've undergone a lot of healing, and I think I'm implementing a lot of right things that are helping with that. And now I'm working on my gut function, digestion, detox, and those are making a significant difference finally after all this time with my psoriasis. I can confidently say that I feel like this is going to be the year that I have all those things totally under control.
That's great. I'm really pleased to hear that. How about you, Gabriella? Any news on your other autoimmune diseases?
Like Vanessa, my Raynaud's is actually definitely tapering down this past year. Besides that, we never really had any other autoimmune diagnosis. I have issues with my thyroid, but I wouldn't say it's exactly an autoimmune issue that's going on. So we're still pursuing natural. I am supported right now through medication still because we haven't been able to figure it out, but we're going to look into bioidentical hormones to see if that can help. And besides that, it's just a lot about my gut and healing my gut and getting all of the issues that stem from that under control, which is what I try and do on a daily basis. So.
And the hormones that you just mentioned, what are they? How do they work?
The hormones? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
I am not entirely sure. I have read some things on it, and I actually have a friend who does bioidentical hormones, and for her it's just in the form of cream, just a little cream to balance like her progesterone and her testosterone and things like that, which is exactly what I need. So I'm still not 100% on what that exactly means, but we're in the process of it. So.
Yeah, you two must be so knowledgeable now after all these things that you've been going through over such a long time of your lives as well. Gosh, especially with you, Gabriella, you're only 19 and you've pretty much lived most of your life with Lyme disease, haven't you? Or problems that go with.
Part of it.
Yeah. So talking with the benefit of hindsight, what would you have done right from the start? That would be any different, and also, well, I guess that's the first of that's an A out of an A and a B question. What would you have done right from the start?
Do you want me to?
Yeah.
Well, when I come across people that say, "Oh, I just got a Lyme diagnosis," or "I'm figuring out that I had Lyme," I always think just because it's become so prominent in my life is take out all of the components that are going to damage your gut, because for me that's where it all stems from. So I feel like if I had to go back and redo it, I would really focus on that, even so alongside all of the different tests and treatments and antibiotics if they're needed and stuff like that. But I feel like if I could have those 1 to 2 years back and just make sure that along the road of doing all these treatments that I wasn't damaging my gut further, and if I was aware, I think that would be something I would definitely change.
Yeah. What about you, Vanessa? What would you do right from the start if you were going through it all over again?
I completely agree with what Gabriella said. Absolutely focusing on, supporting that immune system. And we know now, after being on AIP for so long, that the one surefire way of doing that is focusing on your gut health and making sure that you're not further irritating your immune system. It would have been all diet for me. I would have jumped onto a protocol like the autoimmune protocol right away. I have a feeling I could have saved myself years of heartache and expensive doctor's appointments and treatments and bypassed so much uncertainty and not got to that rock bottom place where I was a few years ago. I feel the same way as Gabriella when I hear of people that are dealing with Lyme or any other chronic disease, to be honest, or infection. I always go there first because I think I was listening to a podcast the other day by Dr., I'm not going to pronounce his name right, Sunja Schwag. He's a Lyme literate medical doctor in the States. He's actually done a podcast with Chris Kresser. And he used a quote from Louis Pasteur, who was one of the original germ theory doctors, Dr. Pasteur said it's not the microbe, but it's the terrain that you have to worry about. So less focus on the bug, whatever bug you might be dealing with in particular, and focus on your body being that terrain that's going to enable your immune system to fight the way that it's meant to do it. Our bodies are meant to fight these germs. They know how to do it, but if we're constantly insulting them and damaging them, they're not going to be able to fight the way that they're meant to. So absolutely, gut health, diet would be the first way to go. And you know, like going back to what my naturopath said, she said, me having been on the autoimmune protocol for as long as I had going into Lyme treatment, I just set myself up so much better for that treatment being successful and for my body to be able to get rebalanced again. And I have to question, and you know, of course I've got no proof on this, but I sort of feel when I hear people really struggling with Lyme, it's one of the first things I do question is how well they have their diet and their gut health and that healing part in place, because I wonder if they don't, if they did end up getting there, if that would enable them to expedite their healing to any certain degree.
Yeah, and it's not just about diet either, is it? I mean, you've already touched on the lifestyle, but there are also environmental factors as well. If you're living in a house that's got a lot of mold in it, for example, then that's not going to help, and you have to limit your exposure to EMFs, don't you? You've got to be careful about the mobile phone usage that you have, the computer usage, and just generally being around any kind of electricals, really, don't you? That's also
Absolutely.
something I know that. Yeah. What do you do, Gabriella? Very quickly, I know that you take quite a few steps to avoid your exposure to bright lights and EMF.
See it as an important aspect, but the blue light is definitely something because I've been experimenting with it for so long, I definitely can tell the negative effects that it has, and now that I wear orange tinted glasses once the sun starts to set, or even if I'm on the computer and because it gives my eyes a break, or if I have the I think it's called F-Lux, the computer system that makes your screen orange, that helps a lot too, and it's just really it helps with my sleep. I would say that's the main area that I see it helping, and then just how restorative my sleep can be, and how, like, comparing it to when I would just watch TV at night or be on my computer, those things have definitely impacted my day-to-day life.
The second part of that question was that we obviously want to sort of raise some kind of awareness, because if people think that Lyme-infected ticks only come out in the spring and summer, that is just not the case. They're capable of withstanding cold temperatures. The only reason more people are probably infected during the warmer months is because they're wearing fewer pieces of clothing. So what would you two say to anybody, really, but also to parents with young children who obviously living a good outdoorsy lifestyle? They have to be very careful. What would you say to raise awareness to those people? And also, I think all over North America, we can safely assume is a tick area now. It used to be on the East Coast, but it's, as I'm sure you know, Vanessa, it's they're on the West Coast as well as in the interior. So what would you say to those people to raise awareness, Vanessa?
Well, I think just what you said, really, that the ticks are out there. There is a chance that the ticks are carrying the Borrelia bacteria that cause Lyme. And I think also, not to scare people, but I think it's important to realize that it's really easy to become exposed to these ticks, especially if you have children and it's a hot summer day. Not likely are you going to be wearing long pants and long socks and all that stuff. And that most of us are exposed to ticks at some point in our life, and some of us could actually be harboring the bacteria, but our immune systems are able to keep it in check, as it should be. So going back to just a general lifestyle and diet, I think it's important to maintain our integrity and our strength as much as we can to allow our bodies to handle these germs as best as they can. So, focusing on avoiding the foods that we are learning more about that are harmful to our gut and to our immune system, and avoiding sugar as much as possible, especially with our kids, and focusing on sleep and exercise and all those other things, and keeping us generally strong overall is going to be probably your best defense, I think. And then, of course, if you come across a tick, I think it's important to remove it. There's websites you can go to that show you how to properly remove it and keep it and send it in for testing. Bring it into the doctors and bring that in for testing because they're able to test. I'm not sure how great the testing is, but they are able to do some testing on the ticks to see if they're carrying the Borrelia directly or any other organisms, and then being vigilant with symptoms afterwards and watching very closely for any adverse typical symptoms or even the atypical ones. Not everybody is going to get that bullseye rash. Actually, very few people get that typical bullseye rash or the fever-like symptoms. So just being aware. I think we're just living in a world now where we have to be continually aware of our health status and not think that we're invincible to this stuff, because we're not.
No, well said. So I've got a question, Gabriella. How healed do you think you are with, having had the AIP on your side for the better part of how many months you've been on it? How fully healed would you say you are?
Well, I would say that I'm getting there. It's been a really long road, and I think catching up with all the things that treatment and just the effects that Lyme has had on my body, getting a hold of all of those and figuring all of those out has been pretty much what the past 4 years has been. And it's really the past, year or so, about a year that I've been on AIP that the healing component, aside from the Lyme, has really come into play. There are some days where it just seems like it is not getting anywhere at all, and then there are the days where I feel like, my joints aren't bugging me as much, my gut isn't as inflamed, I can think clearer, I have a little bit more energy, and those are the days where I can definitely see the improvement, and I can look back on a year ago and say, I am certainly healing. I couldn't tell you how much I think I've healed or how much longer it is, because really I think it's just going to be, I'm not saying I'm going to be dealing with Lyme per se my entire life, but I think it's just going to be a continual work in progress in getting my complete health back and keeping it there and keeping my immune system strong and the rest of my body strong. So I don't think I could really say how much I think I've healed, but it's definitely, I'm definitely healing.
Yeah, that's great news. Would you say the same, Vanessa?
Yeah, and it's interesting, like I never have had symptoms as severe as Gabriella, and they don't really understand why some people get really, really sick with Lyme and some people don't get as sick, and why some symptoms are severe and some are not as severe. And I would definitely have put myself in the higher functioning category. I've never had to deal with the pain, thank goodness, but I have seen it in friends that have had to deal with it. So as far as my progress, I definitely feel like I said earlier, I think that this is going to be my year where I can put a lot of these things to rest, but just like Gabriella said, now it's going to be the maintenance of keeping everything in place that I've put in place and keeping it where it needs to be. One thing that I have learned about Lyme is that you can relapse from it if things start to get really bad, your immune system starts to get suppressed by stress or poor diet or all those things. So I think, as well as Gabriella, that now it's going to be a lifelong journey for me of just that awareness of keeping everything as healthy and in place as I possibly can.
Yeah, so bottom line, it's all disease begins in the gut, and it's important to look after that gut. That's what it's all about. So very quickly, because we're running out of time, resources. We can't go without giving some people resources. Which particular ones have proved really, really useful for you? Gabrielle?
The two main resources that I would say online that my family and I will give to people or go on to in regards to Lyme would be ILADS.org, which is International Lyme and Associated Disease Society, and then just the LymeDisease.org. They're both really informative and straightforward and can give people a lot of information.
Okay, that's great. Vanessa?
In particular, in Canada, there's a website you can go to called CanLyme, and this has provincial representatives. So depending on what province you live in Canada, you can contact your direct representative. And I know I did when I first got my Lyme diagnosis, and the president, Jim Wilson, who is the BC representative, he phoned me right back that day, and I was able to pick his brain about the tests and some of the controversy around the disease and stuff. So that website has been a valuable resource for me. You can follow them on Facebook, and they give you updates on everything going on in Canada with Lyme disease. There's also another website through the States called Treat Lyme and Associated Diseases, and it's run by Dr. Marty Ross, who's a medical doctor, Lyme literate medical doctor, and he runs it with his wife, who's a naturopathic doctor, and he does webinars, I want to say twice a month, I think. And you can submit your questions to him, and on his webinars, he'll answer those questions for you, so give you a bit more specific information to your personal case or questions that you might have. So that I've done that a few times, and that's been really great. I read a book called Cure Unknown by Pamela Weintraub. She's a scientific journalist that had firsthand experience with Lyme disease really wreaking havoc on her family. And that book goes a lot into a lot of the controversy surrounding the disease and the diagnosis and stuff. So if you want to dig a little bit deeper, it's definitely a good read. And I think I mentioned before that podcast that Chris Kresser did with Dr. Sanjay Schwag, talking about Lyme disease. So I would recommend that if you like listening to podcasts. And then I made reference to watching a video interview with Dr. Schwag a while ago, and I found that on a website which is actually new to me. I haven't had a chance to explore it, but it's called Lyme Less, Live More. And you can go in there and watch that interview with Dr. Schwag. He's got a lot of really good information, and then cruise around, and I think they focus a lot about detoxing and cleansing with Lyme disease. So if you're needing some more information on that, I would check that out for sure.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Well, I'm afraid we've pretty much run out of time. We could talk for a lot longer, I'm sure, but we have to leave it there. So I just want to say thank you very much indeed for listening. I hope this gives you an insight into how the AIP can actually work with the diagnosis of Lyme. If you've got any questions, then leave them in the comments below. If you've found this very useful, it would be brilliant to have a thumbs up from you. And don't forget to subscribe so you can tune in and hear when we have more things, which are coming at you every single week pretty much. So before we say goodbye, I've got to say thank you so much to my lovely guest Gabriella from Beyond the Bite, and to Vanessa from True North AIP.